Montana Territory, April of 1877. The wind hit hard across the dry hills outside Miles City, carrying dust and whispers. Folks turned their heads when the stagecoach door swung open and a woman stepped down with a hand on her belly and her chin high. Her name was Priscilla Hart. 24 years old, no ring, and heavy with child. No husband trailing behind her, no father waiting to collect her at the station. Just her and a worn satchel, boots cracked from too many miles, and a baby coming in a few short months. Laughter started low first from the two cowhands leaning on the corral fence, then from the station keeper's wife behind the window. It spread like prairie fire. She's looking to trap a man before that baby slides out. Bet she don't even know who the daddy is. God help the poor fool who takes that on, but Priscilla kept her shoulders squared and her eyes ahead. She walked past them all like she did not hear a thing, though her cheeks burned beneath her bonnet. She made her way to the livery, asking about work. They laughed there too, a woman in her state, no chance. She tried the mercantile next, same thing. By nightfall, she sat behind the church, trying to eat a crust of bread without throwing it up. The baby kicked hard, like it knew the world was already against them both. Then footsteps. Slow, steady. A man's boots. She looked up, ready to snap if it was another cruel joke. But it was not laughter on his face, just quiet eyes and a jaw set like stone. "You all right, ma'am?" he asked. She blinked. "I will be." "You got a place to sleep?" Priscilla's throat worked. "No," he nodded once, then held out a hand. "Name's Dawson Laramie. I got a ranch outside town." "Big enough house, good food, you want a roof, it's yours." She stared at him. "You offering me charity?" "No, ma'am," he said. "Offering you dignity." She hesitated because she had been offered things before, but usually with strings. "And what do you want in return?" she asked. Dawson looked her right in the eye. "Nothing." His quiet voice carried more comfort than 100 warm fires. She took his hand. He helped her into his wagon. They rode in silence, the road wide and lonely under the darkening sky. Priscilla watched him from the corner of her eye, tall, broad-shouldered, hair a little too long and hands calloused from real work. He did not ask questions. He just drove. The ranch was tidy. Not big and fine, but clean. 2 horses in the pasture, smoke curling from the chimney. He helped her down without touching her too much, just enough to steady her. Inside, the stove gave off a soft warmth. A kettle whistled. Priscilla's legs shook from the day, but she stayed upright. "I can sleep in the barn," she said. "You'll sleep in the guest room," he said simply. "You're not livestock." That night, she lay in a real bed with quilts pulled up to her chin. She did not cry, she had done enough of that when she left Kansas. But she stared at the ceiling and wondered if this was just a pause before the next storm. Morning came with the smell of bacon and coffee. She stepped into the kitchen to find Dawson already dressed, frying breakfast. He glanced back. "You eat meat?" "Yes," she said. He nodded. "Sit." She did. A plate appeared in front of her, warm, real food. He poured her coffee and added sugar without asking. "You been in town long?" he asked. "Got in yesterday." He just nodded again. No questions about the baby, no curious glances, just gave her space. After breakfast, she stood. "I can pull my weight. Clean, mend, cook." "I already got food and clean clothes," he said. "But I do not mind company." That day passed slow but not empty. She swept the porch, then peeled potatoes while he worked with the cattle. They barely spoke, but it was not awkward. That night, he brought in a rocking chair from the barn, said it belonged to his ma, set it by the fire. She sat in it, rubbing her belly, and watched the flames dance. "You got people?" he asked quietly. "Not anymore," she said after a pause. He nodded. "Me neither." And just like that, they understood each other. Days passed, then weeks. Priscilla's belly grew, and so did the quiet rhythm between them. She started humming when she cooked. He started whistling when he came in from the fields, but folks in town had not forgotten her. When Dawson came in for supplies, the comments started again. "You really took her in. She yours. Man like you could do better." He stood still in the general store, looking every one of them in the eye. "She is carrying a child and working harder than any of you," he said. "She's everything I need." The room went quiet. When he came home that night, Priscilla looked up from the porch. She squinted. "You all right?" He nodded. "They know now." "Know what?" He stepped close, his voice quiet but firm. "That you belong here." She swallowed hard. "I do not want pity, Dawson. This ain't pity." Then he turned and walked inside, leaving her heart pounding behind him. That night, she stood in the doorway of the kitchen, watching him chop wood for the stove. "Why are you being good to me?" he paused, axe in hand. "Because you deserve good." She stepped out onto the porch, the night air cool around them. "You do not even know what happened to me." "I know who you are now," he said. "That's enough." And for the first time in months, she let herself believe she might be safe. As the days stretched warmer, Dawson built a cradle beside the fire. He sanded every edge smooth, carved a little star on the side. When she saw it, her hand went to her mouth. "You made this," he shrugged. "Figured the baby ought to have something of mine." She could not speak for a long moment. Then, "His name will be Noah," Dawson blinked. "You know it's a boy," she smiled. "I just feel it," he nodded. "Noah, good name." That night, in the soft light of the fire, she watched Dawson rest his hand gently on her belly. "Hey there, Noah," he said, voice low. "We're gonna take good care of you." Priscilla blinked back tears, not from sadness, from hope. She reached out, her fingers brushing Dawson's. He did not pull away. Neither did she. Priscilla woke with the sound of the door closing softly downstairs. Morning light barely touched the edges of the window pane, and the house held the hush of early spring. She eased herself upright, one hand braced against the quilt, the other resting where the baby pressed low beneath her ribs. The floorboards creaked under her steps as she made her way to the kitchen. Dawson stood by the stove, sleeves rolled up, scraping cornmeal into a bowl. "You're up early," she said, voice hoarse from sleep. He didn't turn right away. "Had to check the east fence." Couple of posts were leaning. She stepped closer, eyeing the mud-spattered boots by the door. "Didn't hear the wagon leave, walked it. Didn't want to wake you." She poured water into the basin near the window, dipping a cloth to wipe her face. Outside, the pasture stretched green and quiet. A magpie hopped along the fence rail, head tilting like it was eavesdropping. "I can mend those posts if you want," she said. Dawson raised an eyebrow. "While carrying a full-grown child, I'm not made of glass. You're not meant to carry fence posts either." She folded the cloth slowly. "I don't like being idle." He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Then maybe you help me figure out what to do with that back room. Been meaning to fix it up for years." She studied him. "What's in there now?" "Tools. Some of my pa's old gear. A busted chair leg I never got around to fixing. We could make it a nursery." His brow furrowed, but not in resistance. "You'd want that." "I think he would." Dawson nodded once. "Then that's what we'll do." Later that day, she stood in the doorway of the back room, watching dust swirl in the sunbeams. Shelves lined one wall, cluttered with nails, bits of harness leather, and a rusted lantern. A cracked window let in the smell of pine and the faint sound of Kev's bawling in the yard. "He ever talk about you?" she asked as Dawson lifted a crate of iron scraps. "Who? Your father." He set the crate down gently. "Not much. He wasn't a man for stories." "Mine was," she said. "He'd sit in his chair after supper and tell me things I'm not sure were ever true." "You miss him?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Every day." He didn't press. Just handed her a folded blanket from a corner shelf and said, "Think this'll do for the cradle." They worked side by side until the room cleared enough to see the floor again. She found a small wooden box beneath the shelves. Inside were folded papers, yellowed with age. "Letters?" she asked. Dawson took one from her hand, scanning the faded ink. "My ma's handwriting. I didn't know he kept these." He tucked them into his shirt pocket without a word, eyes unreadable. That night, rain tapped gently against the roof. Priscilla sat near the hearth, a basket of sewing in her lap. Dawson came in from the barn with damp shoulders and a calm face. "Got a visitor today," he said, hanging his coat. She looked up. "Who?" Preacher Morrow. "Said he heard you were living here." She set the needle down. "Let me guess." "He offered to pray for my soul. He asked if we were married." Her hands stilled. "And what did you say?" "I said no. Then I asked if it was any of his business." She exhaled through her nose, half a laugh, half a sigh. "That'll stir the town up again. Let them stir." Silence stretched between them, warm and full. She picked up her sewing again, needle moving steady through the cloth. He sat across from her, boots crossed at the ankle, hands resting on his thighs. "You ever think about it?" she asked without looking up. "Think about what? Marriage?" He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was low. "I used to before." "Before what?" He looked at the fire, not her. Before I stopped expecting anything good to last, she didn't respond. Just folded the cloth neatly and set it aside. I'm not asking, she said after a while. I'm just saying, if it ever came to that, I'd rather choose a man who sees me, not one who pities me. He met her eyes then. You think I pity you? No, she said. That's why I said it. He stood, walked to the doorway, then paused. If I ever ask, it won't be out of duty, she nodded once. Good. He went upstairs and she sat alone with the fire, fingers resting on the swell of her belly. The baby shifted, a slow, strong roll beneath her hand. She whispered something no one else could hear. By the end of the week, the nursery had fresh curtains and a braided rug Priscilla made herself. Dawson built shelves for folded linens and carved a tiny horse to sit on the windowsill. She found him one afternoon, sitting in the finished room, turning the wooden horse over in his hand. You made that for him, she asked. He looked up. I did. You think you'll teach him how to ride if he wants to learn? She leaned against the doorframe. You'd be good at it. He stood and walked over, placing the horse in her palm. You're good at everything else, he said. She held it tight, chest aching with something too big to name. Then he touched her face for the first time, just the back of his fingers against her cheekbone. And she didn't flinch. The baby came in the middle of a thunderstorm, the kind that rolled down off the mountains and filled the sky with bruised clouds and the smell of wet earth. By the time the first pains gripped her, the wind had already tipped over the water barrel and sent the chickens to hiding. Priscilla gritted her teeth against the bolt that shot through her spine and leaned both hands against the kitchen table. Dawson crossed the room in 2 strides. Tell me what you need. She looked up, eyes sharp despite the sweat already beading at her hairline. Boil water, lay blankets by the fire, and don't hover. He didn't argue, just moved fast and without panic. She heard the heavy lid of the kettle clatter open, the fire fed another log, then boots crossing the floor again. I'll send for Mrs. Cadell, he said. She's delivered more babies than anyone else in the county. No, she said, voice firm. There's no time, I know what to do. An hour passed. Then another. The rain came heavy, drumming against the roof in steady rhythm. Dawson stayed close, but not too close, just as she'd asked. He sat on the edge of the hearth, hands clasped between his knees, listening to every sound from the bedroom like it was scripture. Inside, Priscilla worked through the pain in silence, jaw set, breath shallow and quick. She'd brought this baby across 2 states and through 3 towns. She wasn't about to falter now. When the child finally arrived, the storm had passed. The wind settled. The air turned still. She wrapped him in the soft flannel she'd sewn herself, the edges stitched in blue. Her hands trembled as she looked down at his face, eyes closed, mouth open in sleep, his chest rising in quiet rhythm. She heard Dawson's steps in the hall. You can come in. He pushed the door open slow, like he was stepping into church. His gaze moved from her face to the bundle in her arms. He's here, she said. He knelt beside the bed and leaned close, careful, reverent. He's something. She brushed a thumb across the boy's brow. His name is Noah. You remember? I do. They sat like that a long time, her in the bed, him on the floor beside her, the firelight casting slow shadows on the wall. Your hands are shaking, he said softly. I'm not afraid, she said. Just tired. You want me to take him? She hesitated, then nodded. He lifted the baby with the same care he gave to breaking a new horse, slow, steady, quiet. Noah didn't stir. Dawson sat in the rocking chair and held him close. He's warm, he murmured, more to himself than her. Strong, too. She watched them, one hand curled beneath her cheek. You look like you've done that 1,000 times. It's the first, he said, but it won't be the last, she smiled, eyes growing heavy. I hope not. He rocked slow, watching the baby's breath. You should sleep. I will. He didn't get up. He didn't move. He just sat there, rocking the child she'd carried across a hard winter and into this quiet spring. By morning, the sky was clean. A robin perched on the windowsill, chirping like it knew something worth saying. Priscilla woke to the smell of stew simmering low on the stove and the sound of wood splitting outside. She rose slow, careful of every sore muscle, and dressed before stepping onto the porch. Dawson stood in the yard, sleeves rolled, swinging the axe with calm precision. Noah lay in a basket near her feet, bundled and content. You didn't sleep, she said. Didn't need to, he replied, wiping his brow. She reached down and lifted Noah into her arms. I think he knows you already. Dawson leaned the axe against the chopping block. I reckon he knows what's good for him. They stood in silence, the kind that didn't press. Then she turned to him. You've done more than I ever asked. I didn't count the cost. She stepped off the porch. I want to marry you, he blinked. You sure? I didn't say it lightly. Dawson stepped close enough to see the new freckles at her collar and the shadows under her eyes. I'd already made up my mind, Priscilla. I was just waiting till you were ready. She looked down at Noah. We're ready now. He reached for her hand. Then let's do it proper. I'll speak to the circuit preacher next time he rides through. I don't need a dress or a gathering, she said. Just your word. You'll have it every day, she smiled. Then that's enough. He kissed her hand once, slow and without show. She didn't pull away. Noah stirred between them, his tiny fist curling against her chest. And just like that, the three of them stood together beneath a sky just beginning to bloom with light. By early June, the cottonwoods along the creek had leafed out thick and green, their branches whispering above the water like old friends sharing secrets. The sun hung longer in the sky each day, and Dawson had started rising before it, checking the cattle before the heat settled in. Priscilla, still healing but steadier on her feet, took to the garden behind the house, pulling weeds and planting late squash while Noah slept in a shaded basket nearby. One morning, as she thinned the rows of beans with a worn spoon handle, Dawson walked up from the barn holding a small bundle wrapped in brown cloth. I found this in the tack room, he said, holding it out. She brushed her hands on her apron and took it, unwrapping it slowly. Inside was a leather-bound journal, the cover cracked but intact. It was my mother's, he said. She wrote in it after they moved out here from Missouri. I never read it. Priscilla turned a page gently. The handwriting was slanted and neat, notes about the weather, about the first calf born on the land, about loneliness she didn't speak aloud. She wrote like someone who needed to be heard, Priscilla said quietly. I think she did. She looked up. Would you mind if I kept reading it? I'd like that. That night, after Noah had been fed and laid down in his cradle, Priscilla sat near the open window with the journal in her lap. Dawson carved a broken wagon pin by lamplight, the knife tapping softly against the wood. She mentions you, Priscilla said. He looked up. Me, says you were quiet but always watching, that when you were 5, you followed your father out to the pasture and wouldn't come back till you'd seen every fence corner. He smiled faintly and set the pin down. He didn't like that. Said I was underfoot. She didn't agree. Dawson leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. I always wondered if she saw me the way I saw her, steady, worn down maybe, but not broken. She did. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of sage and damp grass through the open window. Noah stirred but didn't wake. Dawson spoke again, slower this time. I think part of me wanted to prove something by staying on this land, that I could hold it together better than he did. You have. He looked at her then, fully. It's not just the land anymore. Priscilla closed the journal and set it aside. You mean me and the baby. I mean all of it. The house, the days, the sound of your voice at supper. I never expected any of it. She stood and crossed to the cradle, smoothing the blanket over Noah's chest. I never expected someone would see me as more than a mistake, she said. But you didn't flinch. Dawson stood too, moving beside her until they both stood over the sleeping child. What happened to you, he said. What brought you here? It doesn't define you. I see the woman who stayed kind when she could have turned hard, who built a home with nothing but her bare hands and a baby in her belly. She turned her head toward him. You don't say that to ease me. No. I say it because it's true. Outside, the crickets had started to hum, and a whippoorwill called from the trees beyond the pasture. The room was warm with lamp glow and quiet with peace. Priscilla reached for his hand. I want to raise him here, with you. His fingers closed around hers. You will. We will. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and they stood like that, listening to the steady hush of Noah's breath and the soft creak of the cradle as it rocked. There were still fences to mend, storms to come, and winters to weather, but none of it felt uncertain anymore. They had become a family not through vows or ceremony, but by choice each day, each small act, each word spoken plain and true. And in that quiet room, under the low hum of summer, every piece of their life fit exactly where it was meant to be. The sun hovered low behind the butts when Priscilla stepped back from the clothesline, arms aching from the final pin. The baby slept inside, wrapped in one of Dawson's old shirts beside the kitchen stove, and the air smelled of warmed earth and lilac. She lingered a moment with her bare feet in the grass, watching the sky shift from gold to rust. Dawson returned from the far pasture with his hat pushed back, eyes squinting against the last light. He carried a coil of rope and a small wooden box under one arm. He didn't speak until he reached her side. "Fence held," he said, "but I found something on the north slope." She raised an eyebrow. "A bear." He set the box down on the porch rail and opened it. Inside, nestled in straw, were 3 small arrowheads, one shaped like a leaf, the others long and narrow, found near a dry creek. Ground's been shifting since the last rain. She picked one up carefully, turning it in her fingers. "They're old, could be crow. Might have been a trail through there once." She looked up. "You think we're living on someone else's story?" He rested a hand on the rail. "We all are, one way or another." That night, while Noah stirred and settled again in his sleep, Priscilla tucked the arrowheads into a cloth pouch and placed it on the shelf above the hearth. "They belong here now," she said. Dawson nodded. "So do we." A week later, a letter arrived from Kansas. The envelope was creased and water-stained, addressed in a tight, unfamiliar script. Priscilla opened it at the kitchen table, her hands steady even as her breath thinned. He watched her face as she read. "It's from my cousin Ruth," she said. "Didn't know she even knew where I'd gone. You want me to step out?" "No." She folded the page slowly. "She says my father passed last summer, left a few things behind, a watch, some land that no one wants." Dawson moved to pour her coffee without asking. "You thinking of going back?" She shook her head. "There's nothing there that feels like mine anymore. You want to write her?" "I will, but just to say I'm all right, that she doesn't need to worry." She slipped the letter into the drawer beside the ledger. "I thought hearing his name again would hurt more, but it didn't. Maybe that means you've healed some. Maybe it means I've finally got a place where I don't have to look back." The days stretched longer. Noah's eyes began to focus, following light and movement. Dawson carved a rattle from a short piece of pine, sanding the edges smooth until the wood glowed pale and clean. He handed it to her one evening with a quiet smile. "He likes the rhythm," he said, as Noah's fingers curled around it. "Just like his father," she said, brushing sawdust from Dawson's palm. Late in July, they stood beneath the cottonwoods with Reverend Haskett, who passed through once a month on horseback. The ceremony was short, just them and the tall grass swaying nearby. Priscilla wore a dress she'd sewn herself, simple muslin with a blue sash. Dawson had trimmed his beard and worn his best shirt, the one with the faint mending at the collar she'd stitched one quiet evening. "I've never belonged to anyone who looked me in the eye and meant it," she whispered during the blessing. "You do now," he said. They shared a meal afterward on the porch, cold ham, pickled beans, and cornbread. Noah slept in the shade while the wind stirred the prairie. Dawson poured her a cup of cider and she leaned into his side, her fingers laced with his beneath the table. "No one in town said a word," she asked. "They know better now," he said. "And anyway, I don't give them reason." That night, they danced slowly in the dirt yard, no music but the hum of crickets and the soft creak of the porch swing behind them. Her head rested against his shoulder, his hand steady at her waist. "You ever think about more?" she asked. "More, children, a bigger herd, maybe a second room." He pulled her a little closer. "Only if it's with you." The next years moved with honest rhythm. The ranch held through the dry spells and the cattle multiplied. Priscilla traded seeds with women upriver, learning when to plant cabbage and when to let the soil rest. Dawson built a smokehouse and added a second stall to the barn. Noah took his first steps in the yard beneath the same cottonwoods where they'd wed. He called Dawson Pa before any other word. In time, he learned to hold a hammer, then the reins, then his own soft questions about the world. On the 5th spring, Priscilla gave birth to a daughter, small and dark-haired with her father's quiet eyes. They named her Clara, after Dawson's mother. The cradle came out again, and Dawson carved another star into the side. Priscilla stood at the doorway one evening, arms crossed gently over her chest, watching Dawson lift Clara in one arm while Noah clung to his leg. "You ever think about how far we've come?" she asked. He looked up, hair dusted with flour from the bread he'd been kneading. I try not to take it for granted. She stepped into the kitchen, slipping her arms around his waist. You never have. They sat that night beneath the stars, the children asleep, the house still. The porch boards warm beneath their bare feet. I used to wonder if anything lasting was meant for me, she said. He reached for her hand, pressing it against his chest. You were meant for this, for me. She leaned her head against his shoulder. I'm glad I stepped off that stagecoach. I'm glad you stayed. The moon rose full, lighting the fields beyond the fence and the roof of the barn. The wind moved gently through the grass, and inside the cradle rocked once, then stilled. Their hands stayed clasped, their hearts steady, and the place they'd built, the life they'd chosen, held strong beneath the wide Montana sky.